Hello and welcome. I'm Ann Vasulis.
And I'm Brooke Sutherland. Courthouses make the best beats. Every day, the curtain goes up and a drama is acted out. These plays don't always have a happy ending, but criminal and civil courts provide a window into society. The courts weigh in on every controversial and polarizing issue that faces the American public.
Two issues that are especially relevant in the Rockbridge area are methamphetamine use and dating violence. In our program, The Preliminary Hearing, our reporters examine how each of these dilemmas affects the courts and the community.
Methamphetamine is one of the most addictive drugs available. So addictive, it can take over users' lives after snorting, smoking, or injecting just one hit. Meth users say the drug makes them feel unstoppable, but then the physical, emotional, and legal effects of meth use take their toll, and the high becomes a nightmare.
I be wake up sometimes going like this, like I'm hitting a pipe. But it's hard to shake. I still think about it. I've been in jail for going on 8 months now, and I still think about it.
Reporter Stephen Peck has more on this devastating drug and its effect on the Rockbridge area.
Thanks, Brooke. According to the 2009 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 12.8 million people ages 12 and older have tried meth at least once. In the Rockbridge area, at least half of all drug cases are meth-related. And despite prevention and rehabilitation efforts, these numbers keep rising.
I've seen shattered people, thought I was seeing aliens. I've seen a little bit of everything. And it's just, I regret it, ever doing it, and I got hooked on it.
Zeb Anthony Henson has been using meth for almost 20 years. He says it's ruined his life and he wants to get help. According to the local probation office, he has attended several Narcotics Anonymous sessions, but has refused all other treatment offers.
I hate myself for doing it sometimes, and I hate who I become, but I end up going back to it every time, and I always won.
Meth causes dopamine, the chemical in the brain that signals pleasure, to skyrocket. But the drug also impairs dopamine renewal. Addicts can never repeat their first high. Continued use so disrupts the brain's neural pathways that even life's basics get hard. Users can't take care of themselves, let alone their families.
But you can't hardly start working with them to start a real good treatment and education program until they've been away from it for a year.
But in the Rockbridge area, very few meth users see that level of care.
There used to be more options that the probation department had to offer people, but it's funding, it's money, and so much of that funding has dried up.
The local probation office cannot afford to send any more drug offenders to Rockbridge area community services for treatment this year. The agency has drained its budget, and there will be no more money until July 1st.
What we're having to do now, we're having to pick and choose, and that's pretty tough, asking officers to decide who you want to get in that program.
Even if probationers do get a spot in a program, treatment is not always effective. Meth offenders are directed to either inpatient or outpatient programs, depending on individual needs. But even the most severe addicts often must return to an environment that they associate with drug use.
When they come back and they start recovering, they face a lot of mess. I call them messes. And they have to take a big old mop out, and they've got to mop all these messes up.
And the Rockbridge area has its own particular set of problems. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, more than 90% of the meth in the area comes from super labs in Mexico. The drugs, transported into the country by planes, boats, and cars, travel across the border into Texas, up to Atlanta, into the Carolinas, and eventually into Southwest Virginia. But law enforcement officials say the demographics of the area and meth use seem destined for each other.
It's basically male, predominantly Caucasian. Economically, what we're seeing is it's lower socioeconomic. And when you think about that, and you think about the demographics of Southwest Virginia, you can see why we have the problem.
But meth is not cheap. According to law enforcement officials, it's about the same price as cocaine. The DEA has busted up around 60 meth labs in Virginia this year, putting the agency on track to pass the 83 labs it took down last year. About 85% of those 60 labs were in Southwest Virginia.
The current trend for manufacturing methamphetamine clandestinely is what they call the shake and bake method, which is in essence you're making methamphetamine in a Coke bottle.
Investigator Donald Sly of the Rockbridge County Sheriff's Office says his agency has encountered only a few meth labs in recent years, but Rockbridge area native Nathan Lee Connor says he's made his own meth several times.
Oh yeah, a middle school kid can make it. Just household materials.
Connor is awaiting sentencing on meth manufacturing charges in the Rockbridge County Circuit Court. Both Connor and Henson have had many brushes with the law, but their problems persist.
When you bring people on probation, but you don't put any state or government resources or private resources really into providing an alternative, you're making them sitting ducks and making society a sitting duck.
For the preliminary hearing, I'm Stephen Peck.
Henson has been arrested more than 10 different times on charges ranging from sexual battery to eluding the police to trespassing. He is currently facing almost 13 years in prison on meth-related state and federal charges and 1 count of assault. In the studio with us today is Probation Officer Walt Obenschain to talk more about meth use in Rockbridge County. Stephen?
Thanks, Brooke. Mr. Obenschain, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, what kind of unique difficulties are there in treating a meth addiction?
Well, the worst thing is we have to determine how long the person has been involved with methamphetamine. Short time use, we can probably get in there and do something very quickly. If it's someone that's been using over a period of months and perhaps even a year or years, then the type of treatment that we're going to request or provide for them is going to be short-term or long-term depending on their use. And those various programs are varied, so we just have to determine what that drug use was, where they are, what kind of criminal difficulty they're in, and pretty much start from there.
Now, do you believe that local resources are enough to tackle this problem?
Well, everybody could use more resources. A lot of it has to do with education. When you refer people to basically community service boards, which we use here, they're having to deal with people that are using all forms of drugs, not just methamphetamine. So you just don't have necessarily a methamphetamine specialist. With some programs that you send them to, people are very well versed and educated about the treatment and what needs to be done with each individual person that's brought to them. So that would be better. As far as locally, about all that we have available to us is Narcotics Anonymous, which is the least restrictive. Then we can do an outpatient program through the local community services board. If that doesn't work, we can place them in an inpatient program for a short period of time that can last anywhere from 30 days to 6 months. And after that, they can come out to aftercare to our local programs, and they'll continue to work with them. We try to work with people with methamphetamine for a period of at least 12 months because according to the data and the knowledge that we have right now in the research, it would take approximately 1 year for someone to be away from the drug, not using the drug in any form, for a period of 12 months before we can really start the hard treatment.
Now, you mentioned it takes a year to get a good treatment. What else goes into that? What makes an effective meth treatment program?
Basically, it's just keeping them away from it, and unfortunately, a lot of times that has to do with some short term of incarceration or a program where they can't leave that program, where it's a secure facility where they can't do it. Now, they're going to go in there and they're going to, this is a drug that affects them mentally and physically, so first things first, they'll try to help them out a little bit physically. Generally, they're in poor physical health. They'll start them on a vitamin therapy, good food, lots of rest, that type of thing, and at the same time, they're going to have education classes where they're going to sit down and talk about what the drug has done to them personally, what it's done to their family, what it's done in the way of their employment, all those factors that go into it. So they start them off rather slowly, but initially the physical addiction we work on, and then the mental addiction.
Now, just how physically and emotionally destructive is methamphetamine compared to other drugs that you see?
Well, the problem with methamphetamine, it only approximately takes one use, if you're really using it, to get addicted to it. Most other drugs, you have to have multiple uses over a period of time, but methamphetamine grabs them the first time. And unfortunately, that pleasure center of the brain wants it more and more and more, so it gets to be more often in larger quantities until they get to a point where they're just using it on a daily basis, and they're out here using the drug for weeks on end before they realize what's happened to them, and they've either run out of it or they've just basically crashed.
And you would agree that this Rockbridge area is very conducive for methamphetamine use to flourish and be as big of a problem as it is?
Yeah, we have, again, I think I explained before that it's basically a blue-collar drug. Doesn't mean just everybody uses it that's that. I mean, a housewife could use it to try to get the work done, get to work, take care of the kids, the whole 9 yards until she realizes what's going on. But generally, we have populations in this area that research again shows us probably would, if they're exposed to the drug, probably would continue on and on and on. I think the area is aware of it. Both the police agencies, the probation offices, the substance abuse providers all realize that we're in an area that that drug has now come in here and can and will be used.
Okay, well, thanks so much for being with us today, Mr. Obenschain. And back to you, Brooke.
The probation office and law enforcement agencies say they are continuing their efforts to crack down on meth manufacturing and its effects on the community.
Virginia legislators and law enforcement officials are dealing with a local version of another national problem, dating violence, particularly on college campuses in the aftermath of a UVA college student's death. In July, Virginia will be the 41st state to expand the scope of protective orders, the document that legally bans contact between parties in domestic violence cases. The law changes the old requirement that the two people involved must live together or be related.
The legislation that got put in this year made the ability to get a protective order more dependent upon what the perpetrator was doing or threatening to do rather than what the nature of the relationship was.
Here with more on the story is Ben Petitto. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Thanks, Annie. This new law makes it easier for women in dating relationships, especially college women, to get protective orders. This bill was initially introduced in early 2010. It gained momentum later that year after the murder of Yardley Love, a senior University of Virginia lacrosse player.
The UVA situation ended up staying in the public eye, and it really helped focus attention on the issue and make legislators and others determine that this time we're going to do something about it.
George Wesley Huguely, also a senior at UVA and Love's ex-boyfriend, has been charged with first-degree murder in Love's death. Huguely admitted to police that he had an altercation with Love, that he kicked in her door and shook her so violently, police said, that her head repeatedly hit a wall. Even if Love had known she was in danger, under Virginia law, she could not have sought a protective order because she didn't live with Huguely. The only option she had was to launch a lengthy criminal process in which she would have had to prove that Huguely stalked her or physically abused her.
It can really, in many instances, put you more at risk than help protect you.
Under the new law, people seeking protective orders need only to show that they've been threatened. Despite the General Assembly's intention, there is concern about whether the new law will work.
And the simple fact is that a protective order is a piece of paper. While it has the effect of a court order and has the ability, therefore, to have somebody just be arrested on the spot, if somebody really wants to have contact with the other party, they're gonna, and use the term of the Dixie Chicks, they're gonna walk right through that restraining order.
That assumes that the police show up in time to arrest someone who's violating a protective order. If that person is violent enough, that doesn't necessarily protect the victim from being seriously hurt or even killed.
When you have that protective order and you're able to contact the local police or whatever public safety officials there are there and tell them you have a protective order and someone is still threatening you, that immediately gets attention.
According to the United States Justice Department, college-aged women have the highest per capita rate of intimate partner violence or dating violence. Colleges like Washington and Lee University have a number of resources and prevention programs to deal with dating violence. University officials say that easier access to protective orders will be part of the solution.
Now what will happen is that option will be one of the first things that will be presented to young women in those situations.
We have a multi-pronged strategy because one program, one strategy won't work. But our goal is to educate the community.
I think what we need to do as a university is make sure to put information out there, and we work very hard to do that. But it's usually not until a person finds him or herself in a situation that they actually begin to delve into what all of those posters and flyers and sessions and programs that they've been asked to attend.
But experts say the first step in the prevention of dating violence is understanding the scope of the danger.
We can see everything from emotional abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse.
We tend to really focus on the physical and then sometimes on the sexual abuse as well, and not pay as much attention to the emotional abuse. What we know from research is that emotional abuse is just as serious in terms of the long-term consequences for the victims as physical and sexual abuse can be.
The experts agree that dating violence can happen to anyone.
But the simple fact is that domestic violence crosses across all socioeconomic lines. It crosses across all lines of all professions, and it can happen to anybody.
Counselors and other university administration officials hope college students will step up when they see signs of abusive behavior by their friends.
The more subtle types of abuse, people will frequently not reach out for help, or if they do, they wait until it is escalated toward a more extreme level of violence.
There are a lot of things that men can, one, not abuse their partners, and men can make it clear to those around them that you know, when they see things that are violent, that they can speak up about it.
You know, a year ago, I'm not sure if I would have said anything. You know, it's a really tough thing to say to a friend, like, stop doing that, or that's, I don't know. It's tough to confront a friend about things like that. Now I don't think I'd have a problem doing it.
People in abusive dating relationships should look out for these warning signs: controlling relationships with others, sending excessive texts, stalking, showing signs of jealousy, exhibiting explosive anger, increasing alcohol or drug use, and isolating a significant other from friends and family.
With that case, there apparently were a number of kind of public incidents. The one that I've read most about is some number of weeks before the murder, the folks actually had to pull him off of her physically.
The experts say women also need to be aware of the increased danger they face right before or after a breakup.
That's when the most homicides occur.
This is the case for the Post-it note breakup. You know, leave a note and be gone before the other person knows that you're planning on leaving. Reach out to your friends and family and let them know what's going on so that they can help you.
UVA and Washington and Lee are 60 miles apart, and Love's death put a spotlight on dating violence at UVA. But no campus is immune to the problem.
I think we're lucky that it hasn't happened at W&L. And I think that dating violence can escalate, just a stalking can too, anywhere, and that's just reality.
For the preliminary hearing, I'm Ben Petitto.
Joel Shinofield, the coach of the Washington and Lee men's swim team, is here today to talk more about the prevention of dating violence. Ben Petitto has more.
Thanks, Ann, and thank you, Coach, for joining us. I understand that you intervened in an instance of dating violence when you were here at W&L in the mid-1990s. Can you talk a little bit about that? And what
Yeah,
happened?
it was actually in 1992. I was at a party in the basement of a fraternity and happened to be sober along with some friends, and we noticed that there was a guy who was actually choking his girlfriend on the dance floor. And so went over to tell him to stop. Things sort of escalated. At that point, he was incredibly inebriated, and we took him outside, and he threatened all of us and tried to attack us, but being sober and him being under the influence, he really couldn't do much. And from there, it escalated into a worse situation. He then threatened me the next day, and then a couple weeks later actually attacked me as a sort of retribution for the incident.
Can you talk a little bit about the attack and what happened?
Yeah, I was serving as a DJ at a party. At the time, I was an independent student, so I was just trying to do things to make some extra cash. And so I was working as a DJ. I was behind the bar in one of the fraternity houses. I felt a tap on the shoulder. Thought somebody was trying to get me to change the music, and turned around, and my face sort of exploded, and I landed on a broken bottle, which went into my back, and went unconscious. And then he continued to hit me while I was unconscious. And then what had happened is he and 5 of his friends had walked in, and the 5 friends just stood in front of the bar so that nobody could see what was happening behind the bar. And then when people finally realized what was happening, they put an end to it and pulled him off me.
Were you hospitalized, or did you spend any time in the
Yes,
hospital?
I had to go to Stonewall Jackson emergency room. I had to have the piece of glass removed from my back. Eventually I had to have surgery to put my nose back together. It was sideways across my face. And I missed exams. It was right before the exam period. I guess it was about 2 weeks before exams. I had pretty serious headaches during that time. Couldn't do my exams till after spring break. Stayed here during spring break actually and just slept and recuperated.
Are you glad you did it? Do you think it was worth it, and kind of why, if you do?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do. I mean, I'm 6'3" and 195 pounds, and you know, she was probably 5'4" and 100 pounds. So if he could do that kind of damage to me, you know, I have no idea, especially in a drunken state, what he could have done to somebody else. So I think definitely it was worth it.
What would your advice be to those who witness dating violence, or maybe even suspect it with a friend or a family member?
Yeah, I think, well, if you're right in the midst of it, you know, obviously not a person who advocates violence, but I think, you know, you need to step in, you need to intervene. If it's something where you hear about it happening and you think that one of your friends may be a victim of sort of a constant abuse by a girlfriend, boyfriend, I think it's wise to suggest that they go to visit our counseling office. We have tremendous counselors here. We have a great counseling office. Our ratio is exceptional among schools. And so I think that's the place to start in that case.
What about in case like yours with a violent incident? Do you think that it's best to step in like you did, or is it better to get your friends to help you, call the authorities? What would your advice be if you saw someone in a violent type incident like you were?
Oh, I think you definitely have to step in. I don't think you can be a human being and witness violence against another human being and not think that's a bad idea. And I think it's incumbent upon us as people, members of a community, to protect each other. And once again, not advocating violence. I wouldn't want anybody else to end up, you know, in the hospital. But you certainly need to step in, and so the person who's being attacked doesn't end up in a bad situation.
Right. Now you're a coach, and I know I play on the sports team here also, and I know coaches play a big part in the culture of a team. What do you think the role of the coach is in teaching and being a part of awareness of dating violence?
Sure. I think it comes down to more modeling behavior. You know, a lot of things can be said in the locker room, and I think it's important that if you hear things that are out of the realm of acceptability, that you mention that and you talk about it, make it a teachable moment with your players.
All right, Coach. Well, thank you for joining us.
Certainly. Thank you, Ben.
And back to you, Ann.
For a list of help resources and information on how to obtain a protective order, visit our website at journalism.wlu.edu/preliminary hearing.
Thanks for joining us today on the preliminary hearing. I'm Brooke Sutherland.
And I'm Ann Vasulis. Again, visit our website at journalism.wlu.edu/preliminary hearing.